Welcome to my Final Fantasy X Sphere Grid Challenge. Right up top, I want to explain what I mean by a Sphere Grid Challenge. This is not a no Sphere Grid run. I wanted to try something a little stranger that would have potentially interesting results. So this is actually a random Sphere Grid Challenge. The goal in mind is that I don't know going in who is going to end up where. I'm hoping by the end that the characters will have a completely different set of strengths and weaknesses than they usually do, and that would have to inform my battle strategy. So how am I randomizing the Sphere Grid? I'm playing the game on PS5 with the PS4 version of the remaster, so no mods in use here, no boosters or anything like that either for that matter. Instead, I am manually making sure the paths the characters take across the Sphere Grid are random using dice. My actual implementation is as follows. I start with the Expert Sphere Grid, as that allows for more wacky results than the standard Sphere Grid, especially with everybody starting with direct paths into other characters' grids. Whenever I go into the Sphere Grid to spend my sphere levels, I proceed as normal along any straight paths until I reach a fork of some kind. At said fork, my rule is to consider straight up, or 12 o'clock, as the starting point, and then go around clockwise in order to label each route a number. For example, let's look at where Kimahri starts. There are 3 routes, one going top right, one going bottom right, and one going top left. In this example, I would count clockwise from 12 o'clock, labeling the top right option as 1, the bottom right option as 2, and the bottom left option as 3. Then I would roll a 3-sided die on a dice roller app. In reality, a 3-sided die is just a 6-sided die with 1, 2, and 3 doubled up. So if the die lands on 1, I go top right, and Kimahri proceeds upwards. In this way, I intend to make every character proceed down a completely random path on the Sphere Grid. For some extra rules, if I encounter a lock node, then if I don't have the appropriate key sphere yet, I will ignore that route and not consider it. But if I have the key sphere, then whoever reaches said lock node first will roll the die as normal, and if luck says so, they will use the key to enter that lock. Whenever a character reaches a dead end for whatever reason, they will backtrack to whatever fork is nearest and roll the dice again, or proceed down the other path if there is only one. As I mentioned, my goal here is to create strange and different builds for each character that circumvents their traditional party dynamics. I will mention before we get started here that I divided this challenge into 3 acts in order to get more in-depth with the story. However, this particular act ends in a somewhat low-level area, so the random progression of the party doesn't have a huge impact on how battles play out, with one small exception. So this act will mostly just be setting up some of the changes that will have bigger ramifications further into the game. With the explanation out of the way, let's name our protagonist, who I will be referring to as RNGesus for the rest of the run, and get started on the story. RNGesus is having a typical day as an ultra-talented sports prodigy when, seems some footage is missing here. Well, it seems like the city is under attack or something. So, RNGesus meets up with his much older friend Auron, and the two start to flee down the interstate away from the crisis. Or maybe towards it. It seems like they might be going the wrong way. After they run into some creepy monsters, it becomes apparent that RNGesus is not up to the task of fighting these guys. So, Auron has to give him a sword and tell him how to use it. They battle the monsters, cutting the ones that matter and running, until they run into a really big one, a sin spawn. After Auron totally shows off how much stronger he is, they beat up the sin spawn. And then Auron totally throws RNGesus under the bus by tossing him inside the big monster's mouth, or whatever that large orifice is supposed to be. RNGesus wakes up cold and wet in some strange dark place. He swims around for a little while until suddenly another horrible monster attacks. What a bad day this is turning out to be. After getting punched a few times with punches that do suspiciously exactly half of his remaining HP per hit, he decides this isn't at all worth it and bails. A narrow escape leaves him trapped in a cold dungeon, and he's very cold and hungry.
I need food.
RNGesus builds a fire and tries to get some shut-eye. then has a lame dream about being chastised by an older male figure. Get used to this, it happens a lot. After being rudely awakened by another ugly monster, he tries to fight, but things are going slow. That's when the wall suddenly explodes, and some big buff dudes and a small underage girl walk in, looking even scarier than the monster. But they're friendly, I guess? Because the girl runs over and starts throwing grenades at the monster. After they defeat their foe, things are looking up. RNGesus finally found a friend. Or so he thought, because then he gets punched in the gut and kidnapped. He wakes up on a rusty salvage ship in the middle of the ocean. After playing charades, he gets convinced to go for a swim with the underage girl and happily agrees. At this point, we get the tutorial for the sphere grid and can finally make some choices. When we finally get control again, we go straight into RNGesus' sphere grid and roll the dice for the first time. The result? RNGesus immediately breaks away from his own sphere grid and heads down towards Kimahri's. As we only have the one sphere level with RNGesus and none for Mysterious Girl, we move on into the deep water. The pair head down into the ocean together and fight some fish. As they explore the strange ruins at the bottom of the ocean, they run into a horrible squid monster that attacks them. They use some really impressive teamwork to do a pincer attack and pelt it with grenades, defeating it before it could do too much damage. After returning to the ship triumphant, finally RNGesus gets some food. And suddenly, the big monster attacks again and knocks him right into the ocean, where he passes out and wakes up in a completely different place. RNGesus wakes up floating face down on a lush sandy beach, and suddenly gets smacked in the head with a ball. Being the sports prodigy that he is, his first instinct is to show off how talented he is, and he sends it back with an epic shot. The guys on the beach are super impressed. After swimming to shore, the guy with the big hair invites RNGesus to his house to eat some more food, an offer which he can't refuse. We learn this guy is named Waka, and he is the coach of the local blitzball team. Since blitzball is the only thing RNGesus cares about in this world, he realizes his best bet is to play with these guys, so at least he has some function in society. When the guys make it to the nearest town, Waka asks RNGesus to present himself to the summoner. In attempting to do so, he learns that he isn't allowed to visit the summoner, because she's in the temple and normies can't go inside. So he goes to bed. After a nice nap, RNGesus hears from Waka about how the summoner hasn't come out for several days now. Showing obvious concern for this stranger's life, he flagrantly ignores social norms by running inside the temple.
Like I care!
Solving some puzzles with some balls, he makes his way deeper until he reaches the deepest chamber, where he meets even stranger characters, a busty goth girl with a perpetual scowl on her face, and Lion Papa. After being scolded for breaking the law by entering this temple without permission, suddenly the door opens and a person emerges from the deepest chamber. It's a cute girl! They go outside and ask the girl to do the cool thing, and that's when she does some magic stuff and a giant bird monster comes out of nowhere. But I guess it's her friend or something, so it's cool. We decide not to rename Aeons on this run, so we stick with the typical name Valefor this time. We learn the cute girl's name is Yuna and that she is a summoner, and apparently summoners are kind of a big deal, like talented sports prodigy tier big deal. After some awkward flirting, RNGesus goes to bed and has another lame dream where he gets made fun of. Waking up the next day, RNGesus learns he is riding the same boat as Yuna and her guardians, so he sets out to cross the island together. At this point, we get some mandatory tutorials. None of them are a particular threat, and they aren't really meant to be. The battle with Kimahri goes pretty well even. Also, I realized before I left that I forgot to get Valefor's other overdrive, so I headed back to get that. Finally, after getting near the end of the area, I decided to stay and fight a few battles just to get some levels and actually do something with this challenge. The results after a short grind: RNGesus still moving into Kimahri's grid, and he learns Jinx and Lancet. Lulu just stays on her own track. Waka stays on his own track as well. I decide that even if someone is not going down a particular route, If they can reach the node from their position, it's fair game. So Yuna picks up extractability right next to her starting position. Then she goes down into her own grid to pick up some null spells. Now it's time for our crew to board the ship and head over to the next location. They say their goodbyes and the ship sets sail. But shortly after that, the big monster comes back. Sin. RNGesus and the others fight off a giant sin fin and some sin scales. Even Kimari joins in on the fun. Once the battle is over, RNGesus is knocked into the water and Waka has to come to his rescue. A pretty tense battle later and they come out on top. But the nearby village of Kilika isn't so lucky and the town is basically wiped off the map. The group visits the town and Yuna performs her duty, the sending ceremony, sending the souls of the recently departed to the afterlife, called the Far Plane. The next day, RNGesus manages to save a little girl before she falls into the ocean. He gets rewarded with a single ether for his efforts. The boys are getting ready to pray for victory at the Kilika temple and head off into the jungle. Almost immediately, Kimari gets his tutorial for learning blue magic, so I stock the free overdrive and dispatch the enemy like normal. Now, a short grind while exploring the jungle and picking up all the loot. During this grind, Waka finally deviates from his route and starts heading up into Oren's grid. We also make the initial choice for Kimari, which results in him heading upwards towards RNGesus' grid. We see RNGesus getting close to where Yuna started. Maybe he will end up a healer? After some leveling, the crew fight the big bad boss of the forest, Lord Ochu. Waka flubs his overdrive as per usual. Yuna and RNGesus spin their wheels for a little while, doing basically nothing, while Lulu pumps some magical iron. Once Lulu starts going off, that's when some real progress starts being made. Sick of all this fire, Lord Ochu goes to sleep to try to heal himself up. Now, Yuna shows off why she's really there, and summons Valefor. Since Valefor is flying, he is immune to the earthquake retaliation strike from being woken up. So Valefor is pretty safe to just do as much damage as he can to this thing. When things are looking spicy for Valefor, Yuna dismisses him and Lulu comes back in to finish the job with her fire. Yuna gets a good smack in with her stick once for good measure though. Easy winnings. The local forest rangers are very impressed. Now, everybody heads up to the temple together, but that's when disaster strikes. The crew come up against a sin spawn. I'll be completely honest, I was using Jinx, a lot at this point in the game, because I didn't yet know it's actually the worst ability in the game. My understanding of the luck stat was that it affected both accuracy and evasion, as well as crit rate, but I wasn't aware that when using Jinx, it does not in fact lower enemy luck stat. It just raises the chances of getting a crit on that enemy, as well as lowering their evasion. Accuracy is not affected, which was actually the main reason I was even using it. I thought, stacked with Dark Attack from Waka, it would make enemies basically never hit. Anyway, terrible misunderstanding of game mechanics aside, this boss goes pretty much as usual. Once again, Valefor comes in for some action. Valefor is immune to poison, which means the counter when the boss comes out of its shell doesn't affect it. Since the boss is also weak to fire, Valefor used fire magic to do as much damage as possible. Finally, Valefor gets the kill and the crew move on to the temple. Now, they run into some typical high school bullies in flamboyant purple uniforms. RNGesus gets unusually flustered when he's around bullies. It's his daddy issues, I guess. Similarly, not long into the temple, Yuna is subjected to her own bully in the form of Summoner Donna. How does this outfit stay on anyway? The crew go down into the cloister, but leave RNGesus up top as he isn't allowed inside. Then, Bully Donna comes back and does her thing, sending RNGesus down the elevator anyway. Well, since I'm already at the bottom of this long elevator, might as well just go inside, right? Not like I could just wait for the elevator to come back down and go up again, or wait at the entrance until everybody else comes back out. Nope, couldn't possibly do that. Breaking the law is the only viable option. Another ball puzzle later, RNGesus makes it to the inner chamber where he is once again chastised for his behavior. They walk away with the real reward, a new Aeon in the form of Ifrit. RNGesus starts putting two and two together when he sees how popular Yuna is. Can he really be a superstar when this girl is hogging all the limelight? He has to scream out in anguish while coming to terms with these feelings. The crew board a ship to the next location, the blitzball city of Luca. While on the ship, RNGesus practices his blitz technique while fighting lingering daddy issues, and we pick up the ever-important blitz skill Ject Shot, which will be very handy later. Arriving in Luca, RNGesus is impressed with how big and lively this city is compared to the backwater island and ruined jungle town he visited up to now. The announcers are hyping up the teams arriving in Luca, and they really go hard in playing up the Luca goers and playing down the homeboys. RNGesus is having none of that and makes a huge ass of himself in order to clap back. Everybody is excited when they hear the news that the president himself is coming to watch sport ball with all the normies. So the crew go to see him, and when they get there, they see a giant prick instead. RNGesus gets some real creeper vibes from this fella, for good reason. While preparing for the blitzball tournament, suddenly Yuna runs in and tells RNGesus that his old pal Auron is hanging around nearby. Excited to see his older male friend, he immediately bails on the game to go find him. While running around with Yuna, he tries to teach her how to whistle, just in case they get separated. When they finally reach the cafe that Auron is supposed to be hanging out at, they see he is nowhere to be found. Instead, Kimari runs into some old high school bullies of his own. RNGesus once again gets hot under the collar, seeing his lion papa being harassed. It is at this point that we hear Yuna is missing. While RNGesus was hyping up Kimari, some Albed blitzers kidnapped her as collateral to guarantee their win. Funny, because the actual best team in the league is the Albed Sykes, as anybody who has tried to score against Nimruk knows. Lulu, Kimari, and RNGesus run off to try and rescue Yuna from her captors on the docks, fighting little stabby robots along the way. Meanwhile, Waka is trying to hold it together long enough for them to complete their mission without losing the game. When they finally board the Albed ship, they fight a big blitzball-themed robot called the Obliterator. RNGesus gets the bright idea to use the nearby crane to deal some hefty damage to it. I didn't realize how close it was to being dead, so I was spending a lot of wasted turns using buffs and such, only to accidentally kill it with a melee hit from RNGesus. After rescuing Yuna, who apparently didn't need much help to begin with, RNGesus starts reminiscing about his time on the Albed scavenger ship. Yuna then reveals the bombshell. She is actually part Albed too. This doesn't seem to leave much impact on RNGesus, but Lulu rightly warns him to keep this particular revelation a secret. Lulu uses her goth magic to signal Waka that Yuna is safe, leaving room for Waka to pull a pretty impressive last-second shot that wins the game for the Aurochs. Unfortunately, it was a bit of a rough time, so he's too beat up to play the final match. Time for RNGesus to sub in and show off what makes him a true sports prodigy. As the announcers continue to talk smack about our heroes, Auron approaches the stadium as stoic and cool as he possibly can manage. RNGesus and the team line up to get ready to start the match, and the goers do the same, except they're assholes about it. And blitz off! As the game starts, Jasu quickly gets his hands on the ball and passes it to RNGesus, who goes for an early shot. And goal! Only 1 minute in, and they're already leading. Starting again, the goers are driving the ball deep into enemy territory and try to shoot against 3 defenders. It goes predictably terribly. Jasu once again gets the ball into RNGesus' hands, who takes it as close as he can to the Luca goal. Unfortunately, this time he bit off a little more than he could chew. They manage to block the ball and get it back, but Dato quickly snatches it and goes for the goal himself. It's a bit of a back and forth as the goers take the ball again and pass it across the court. They keep passing the ball around, eating up as much time as possible before getting the ball to Bixen, who is by far the best shooter on the team. And this is not great for poor Kipa, who can't handle that strong of a shot and lets one in. The next toss-up puts the ball in Letty's hands, and he passes it to RNGesus, but then the clock hits halftime and we break for a quick locker room pep talk.
Shoot like crazy!
Down!
Before the second half, RNGesus equips the powerful Ject Shot. With the scores tied, we start with Letty getting the ball in the blitz-off. He puts it in RNGesus' hands, who runs the ball down court to the Luca goal. Breaking to Belgerda, he uses Ject Shot to remove the other blockers, and soundly gets another goal with no issues whatsoever. Now, the goers get the ball and their forward starts running it into the Aurochs' defense. They then pass it back and forth a few times, for seemingly no reason. When they're behind, it seems a strange strategy to try and run out the clock. RNGesus gets his hands on the ball after a fumble, but there isn't much he can accomplish this far from the goal, so he shoots pretty fruitlessly and the blocker catches it. That's when suddenly, the game is interrupted by cheering from the crowd. With 2 minutes left in the game and the goers down 2-1, the crowd starts calling out, "Waka, waka, waka." RNGesus knows this isn't his moment, so he bows out to let Waka take the spotlight in the last game of his career.
To be honest, I did kind of feel left out. But it really was the Oryx and Waka show after all.
Waka joins the game, fresh and ready to go for the last 2 minutes of the tournament. Blitz-off ends with Letty getting the ball. Letty quickly passes it to Waka, who swims all the way down court to the Luca side and does a powerful Venom shot, blasting right past his blocker and getting another goal. Now leading 3-1 with only a minute left, the tournament is almost assuredly won for the Aurochs. They just need to run out the clock. And the goers are more than happy to waste time for them by doing horrible shots through multiple blockers. At the end, Jasu gets the ball and just runs it around for a few seconds to cap off the game. A resounding victory for the Besaid Aurochs, and a rather perfect knocking down a peg for the cocky Luca goers, who would never recover. They become the worst team in the league for the rest of the game. RNGesus comes out to meet up with Waka and congratulate him, when suddenly screams are heard and some ugly fish monsters appear. Now, the two of them have to battle their way out of the Blitz arena, taking out fish one by one. At this point, RNGesus is too weak to one-hit kill a fish without a critical hit, and Waka is the same, which means both of them need to crit hit to successfully defeat one. It makes this rather long sequence of constantly respawning fish feel like an eternity. Since RNGesus recently entered Lulu's grid, I attempted to use Blizzard and see if his magic was better than his melee, and boy, it sure wasn't. Realizing I didn't have much choice but to just push through with weak melee attacks, I try to keep damage to a minimum by guarding with Waka when there isn't time to get a kill. Unfortunately, my big mistake is that I assume there is a chance to heal between this long battle and the next one. There isn't, so my finishing this battle with low HP with both Waka and RNGesus ends up being a huge liability. After the fish battle, we see Auron finally making his first move. A dragon comes strutting out, and Auron is just like, "I'm too cool for this," and slaps him silly in one hit. Waka and RNGesus are both surprised to see Auron, but a fight is just around the corner, with RNGesus starting the fight at just 2 HP. So I'm forced to spend the first turn healing. After that, I set up a few debuffs on the big bird. Once again, I waste turns with Jinx, thinking it lowers accuracy, but otherwise just hit hard with Waka and Auron. Except for the early high potion on RNGesus, the battle with Garuda goes pretty well, and I was never in danger at any other point. Fiends continue to rampage in the blitzball arena, and that's when Big Creeper shows up and summons his big mommy mummy to take them all down. With everybody safe, things calm down and the party reorganizes to figure out the next steps. Waka gives up his trophy to the rest of the team and says his goodbyes. RNGesus throws a hissy fit at Auron, really showing how cool and mature he is.
I'm telling you, it's all your fault!
That's when the bombshell is dropped.
It is. Sin is checked.
Auron says he will offer his services as a guardian to Yuna and convinces RNGesus to tag along as well. Yuna decides to pull RNGesus aside and show off her whistling skills. And that's when the famous scene happens. No memes here, everybody knows them anyway. So before I head off to Mihen Highroad, I decide to do a little blitzball. I start by heading back into Luca to pick up some new players. Not really savvy on who is or isn't good yet, I just poke around and see who is available. First, I find Jumal in the courtyard. I sign him, then keep moving. Next up, I find Shami on the bridge. I grab her too. And finally, I find Zealots by the theater. Now with 3 new players, I am informed the team can only hold 8 and someone needs to go. Sorry, Keepa. I check out my new crew and set up my base roster for the team going forward. I have RNGesus in left forward as usual, with Shami opposite him on the right. Then I put Dato in the mid position. Next, I have Jasu and Zealots take up defense. And finally, Jumal as goalie. Now, we start blitzing and leveling these guys up. They'll be a decent team before I'm through. The Highroad is a pretty lengthy straight road with tons of NPCs to meet and talk to. I quickly discover that many of them give items just to support Yuna, so I make a habit of talking to literally everybody who walks by. Shortly into the Highroad, we get the first battle, and RN shows what he's good at: armored foes. With the tutorial out of the way, I keep moving down the road, fighting every battle I get into. For this run, because I want to keep leveling and moving around the grid, I will be avoiding escapes unless absolutely necessary for survival. The team runs into another summoner along the way named Belgamine. For this first summon duel against Belgamine, I make a pretty big mistake. I summon and use Valefor's overdrive right off the bat, which gives Belgamine's Ifrit several turns in a row to pummel me. Ultimately, my Valefor goes down and I lose. Fortunately, this is an optional battle, and also gives rewards whether you win or lose, so I decide to live with the loss and move on. The party continues down the road, and RNGesus just can't help himself when he sees a blitzball sitting on the ground and kicks it as hard as humanly possible into the horizon. The nearby kid who owns the ball is not very pleased to see this. Oops. Some more sphere grid action. RNGesus gets further along into Lulu's grid, picking up a couple more spells. His magic stat still sucks though. Waka gets a pretty hefty strength boost in Auron's grid, and Auron makes his first moves, going towards RNGesus' grid to start with. Kimahri doesn't get a whole lot, but is making some progress towards RNGesus' grid as well. Hopefully one of them gets haste soon. Lulu refuses to get off her own grid, so she's as vanilla as they come. Yuna learns life, which will probably come in handy later. Some more battles along the road leads to more levels, but the situation stays much the same as before. Kimahri indeed will be getting haste shortly though, after confirming his route, and Yuna picks up Prey finally. That's a pretty big get, I think. After getting the last of the basic magic spells, RNGesus heads back to the nearest fork and confirms his route into Lulu's grid. So hope he gets some magic soon. Halfway down the road, the team arrives at a travel agency run by an Albed capitalist. Waka is none too pleased, as a certified racist against Albed, but Auron rightly calls him out for his antiquated views. Before heading to bed for the night, RNGesus bonds with Yuna while viewing the sunset outside the travel agency. In the morning, it's time to prepare for a doozy of a fight. Hearing some commotion outside, the team heads out and finds the chocobos going absolutely crazy, and some ugly monsters sucking them down like chicky nuggies. This is the chocobo eater, and I was woefully underprepared for this one. Once again, I try using RNGesus' magic. Not at all worth it. Barely scratches the thing. Lulu shows him how it's done, doing more than 5 times the damage with the same spell. They get pushed to the edge of the cliff right off the bat, and things are looking a bit grim. Yuna subs in and decides to summon Ifrit. Considering this thing is weak to fire, sounds like a reasonable choice. A couple fires is enough to push the chocobo eater on his back, but not enough to advance away from the edge of the cliff. As a Hail Mary, Ifrit uses Hellfire, hoping to do enough damage to mean something, but because Aeon Overdrives cost so much speed, it just leads to Ifrit eating a punch and going down. And that was the end. Immediately after the team returns, they are pushed off the edge. Now, I know this fight isn't imperative to win, and just like Belgamine, you can just ignore a loss and move on. But I wasn't having it. This one felt a bit more personal. So, I reloaded my save and tried it again. I adjust my starting lineup to be Auron, Lulu, and Kimahri this time. This is because the Chocobo Eater is both armored, so only Auron and Kimahri do full damage, but also weak to fire. So that team of 3 would be able to output the most damage at the start and try and take the initiative. At first, it goes pretty similarly with the team being pushed to the edge of the cliff, but this time there's enough damage output to push him back shortly after. I also discover in this fight that Lulu's overdrive kinda sucks. The damage penalty on each spell cast makes it absolutely not worth it over just casting the spell. Anyway, once the boss is getting lower on HP and the team is not pushed against the cliff, I figure it's time to get the XP credit for everybody else and bring in the benchers. Yuna once again summons, and this time uses Valefor for its high evasion. The boss basically can't hit this thing, especially with blindness from Waka. I even get the overkill using Valefor's overdrive since missed attacks generate a ton of overdrive on Aeons. Overall, a much better performance, but I missed the key spheres gotten from knocking it off the ledge. Oh well. The crew decide to journey the rest of the Highroad on Chocobo back and take the travel agency up on their offer for a free rental. Collecting a little loot on the way, they thoroughly explore all the side roads before ending up at the end. At this point, it seems the road is blocked thanks to the impending Crusader operation against Sin in the next area. It seems hopeless at first, but then Seymour shows up out of nowhere and throws his political weight around to try and show off in front of Yuna, letting the party through. RNGesus really isn't having it.
Who does he think he is?
He's a maester. Better get used to it, yeah?
When they show up on the Mushroom Rock Road, Waka has a crisis of faith when he tries to talk to Seymour about the operation details and their use of forbidden machina. Seymour just does not care whatsoever, and RNGesus agrees with the ideas, if not the man speaking them. After a few battles on the Mushroom Rock Road, I go back to blitzing a little bit. This time, a tournament has popped up with a pretty substantial reward, Waka's next overdrive. While making my way through Mushroom Rock Road, I get quite a bit of XP, so I get some more sphere levels. Waka keeps going through Auron's grid. Auron ends up moving back down towards Kimahri's grid, which seems like a bad omen for Auron in the future. RNGesus proceeds through Lulu's grid, picking up a little magic stat. Lulu rolls the dice, and ultimately rolls high, getting her raw spells. Kimahri finally picks up haste, giving him a solid party roll. Then he rolls the dice, aiming down towards Waka and Auron's grid. Yuna continues making her way through her own grid. RNGesus is really looking like a weak link right now, so he even goes down a couple times to enemies, requiring Yuna to utilize that life spell she picked up. Picking up even more levels, the only notable changes are that Lulu now has her whole kit of raw spells, everybody else just moving along the track. When we finally get near the end, we encounter Gata and Lulu. Gata is mad that he is being stationed at base instead of battling Sin on the front lines, and Lulu is more composed and seems to recognize that this might be the end of his story. Waka gives him a punch in the face after he admits that it's his fault that Waka's brother joined the Crusaders and ultimately died in battle. Then we all bid some sad farewells. If this isn't the tragic last scene of a character, I don't know what is. Waka breaks his toe kicking a rusty old cannon like a real genius. I see another save point right before the command center entrance and can't help myself but get a couple more blitz games in, thinking the league ends after 5 rounds, but I was sure wrong. All in all, throughout my time running through Mi'ihen Highroad and Mushroom Rock Road, I completed 8 blitzball matches, 5 in the league and 1 full tournament, which rewarded Waka's overdrive attack reels. The basic takeaways I have are that Jet Shot kind of trivializes the game at this point, and that as long as you get a somewhat competent goalie, you'll never let a goal in. Jumal is pretty decent at this point in the game. He is definitely keeping the balls out of the net. It doesn't take much research to see that Nimruk is the best goalie in the game, and that is apparent even from playing against him. The Albed Sykes are by far the hardest team to play against, and it is completely because of him. Even Jet Shot has a chance to fail. Anyway, I was hoping to clear a league during this time, but I underestimated how many matches that would be, so I gave up after 5, which is enough to play against every opposing team once. I plan to play more during the next act in the story, especially when a tournament or something has an overdrive or a sigil for Waka. Gata is acting pissy at the door to the command center. Little does he know that is absolutely the best place for him to be. Auron meets an old quote-unquote friend at the command center. Maester Keenock acts all friendly, but Auron clearly doesn't like this guy one bit. We also get some military industrialist vibes from him, as he shows just how little he cares for the lives of these people. As the operation begins, immediately one of the Sin spawn they brought here to lure Sin breaks loose and attacks the camp. I start by using newly learned Focus with RNGesus to buff Lulu, but he immediately gets taken out by the boss. Lulu does her thing and nukes the boss with her raw spells, going for the head first. Auron subs out for Yuna to revive Dummy, only for her to take a punch and go down right after. At one point, I try to use Waka's new overdrive, but it doesn't go particularly well. Basically a total waste of time. I finally use Lulu to get Yuna back up, then haste Lulu with Kimahri. Lulu goes ham with the magic, totally carrying the fight. Then I use Grand Summon on Ifrit to see how much damage I can do with Hellfire. It turns out, a pretty good amount. The head and both arms are overkilled, with the body taking substantial damage. Ifrit also dodges once, which allows him to stock overdrive again before his turn comes up. Might as well go for round 2 of Hellfire. The boss isn't dead yet though, and Ifrit gets beaten down before he can act again. Lulu jumps back into the fray and takes stock of the situation. She goes off on the arms with magic to take them down quickly. Kimahri uses haste on Yuna so she can heal everybody more effectively. This party setup is working out reasonably well. I summon Valefor next to give it a go at taking down what remains of the boss, but it just manages to beat the arms and then gets taken down. Now we have an open target to deal as much damage as possible before it can recover. I sub in Auron to power break and reduce melee damage. Yuna is just using Prey every turn to restore as much HP as possible without using any resources. But my damage isn't quite enough to beat the boss before it regenerates its arms. It is also getting close to going down, so I bring in Kimahri and Auron to deal melee damage with Lulu continuing to spam magic. I also stack up some cheers to maximize defense against its hard-hitting punches. Auron manages to one-shot an arm for overkill. Then Kimahri takes 2 attacks to beat the other. The boss is looking bad now, and Lulu manages to finish the job with 1 more cast. At this point, Big Daddy starts showing himself out in the ocean. It would be hard to call this anything less than a massacre. Sin just completely wipes the floor with all the Machina and Knights attacking him, disintegrating most of the opposing force with a single energy blast. The boss comes back for round 2 and attacks Yuna, but Seymour comes out to show off how powerful he is. This is the only battle in the game where you control Seymour. He has reasonably more magic stat than Lulu, so he comes off as kind of strong for this point in the game. But I mean, he's only like as strong as Makalani or maybe even earlier. He's hyped up for really nothing. Anyway, with Seymour pelting the boss with strong raw spells, Yuna healing with Prey, and Auron being there, the fight goes pretty uneventfully. What I found funny is that Seymour gets XP at the end and sphere levels, and it looks like his levels are way lower than the party. Next, we see Sin destroy the rest of the Machina, ending a pretty one-sided battle. RNGesus wakes up on the beach and looks around for survivors, finding Gata trembling and cursing his fate. RNGesus is furious that his father did this, so he chases him out into the ocean, swimming for what looks like miles and miles. He has a few flashbacks of life with his abusive jackass of a father, cementing in his mind that Sin is, in fact, his father. Yuna does the sending, and Auron consoles RNGesus about what just happened and his role in this story. Auron confronts Keenock about his callous behavior, throwing innocent crusaders in Al Bhed into the fire to cement his position in the church. Then, Seymour tries to improve his relationship with Yuna, but I don't think she's really getting his intentions much. And that's the end. I decided this would be the best place for an act break, considering the flow of the story in FF10. The party is resolved to continue with Yuna's pilgrimage, lots of people die, Seymour is becoming a more relevant character in the story, and we even get a bonus. Kimahri finally says his first lines.
In dark times, she must shine bright.
Huh?
At the end, a recap of the sphere grid situation. Lulu is angling for the strongest member of the party right now, mostly because she hasn't broken out of her own grid. Auron is still decent, but his meandering around RNGesus and Kimahri's grids probably lowered his potential a bit. Kimahri is also meandering a bit, though I'm hoping he heads into Auron's grid to pick up some more power. He has haste, which is a great boon and gives him a solid role in the party. RNGesus is a weak link, no doubt about it. He is currently near the start of Lulu's grid picking up some magic, but his initial magic stats suck so much he's still terrible. Waka is picking up some good strength in Auron's grid, meaning he will probably end up a strong physical attacker before long. And finally, Yuna is also sticking to her own grid, making her still the premier healer of the group. I would say the strongest and most important members I have right now are Lulu, Yuna, and Waka, with Kimahri and Auron still holding on, RNGesus falling way too far behind. This is still early days for this run, so the shifting around of grids hasn't had too much of an impact on my ability to win battles. But Act 2 will be a different story. There are some serious difficulty spikes coming up, notably Makalania Temple and Bavel. By then, how will the party look? Will Lulu still be holding things up? Hard to imagine considering how much magic falls off in performance late game, but we will have to wait and see. For now, I just want to say thank you for sitting through this video, which is essentially just a story recap and lots of blitzball. I think the more interesting stuff is coming later. Please like and subscribe, and look forward to part 2 of this series where more RNG action awaits.